I never thought healing could begin with a lie. Yet, that's exactly how my journey started. One fake name, one borrowed profile picture, one late-night decision that changed everything. It wasn't a rebellion. It was survival. For most of my life, silence was my family's love language. My parents weren't the shouting kind. They were the quiet destroyers. The kind who used silence as punishment, disappointment as currency. When I tried to talk about how their words made me feel, my mother would say, "Don't exaggerate, Emily. You always want attention." My father would glance up from his newspaper and mutter, "Your mother's right. Stop being dramatic." And my brother, the golden child, would smirk from across the table, as if he'd won some invisible game. I learned early that in our house, truth was treason. By the time I was 24, I was living in a small apartment across the city, working as a freelance writer for a blog that never paid on time. Every month was a struggle, but at least it was my struggle. The problem was, I couldn't stop thinking about the years I'd lost trying to please them. Every memory, every birthday where I wasn't enough, every dinner where I felt invisible, kept replaying like an unfinished story. And one night, around 2 a.m., when loneliness hit harder than usual, I opened my laptop and created a new account. Username: Aurora Gray. It sounded soft, almost poetic. A name for the girl I wanted to be, someone who didn't flinch at the sound of her mother's voice, someone who could speak and not be silenced. I told myself it was just an experiment, maybe a place to share writing anonymously. But deep down, I knew it was something more, a way to finally say the things I'd been forbidden to say my whole life. At first, my posts were short, simple, reflections about boundaries, emotional exhaustion, and feeling unseen. I didn't mention my family directly. I didn't need to. People online understood. Comments began appearing. This hit me so hard. You just put my feelings into words. I thought I was the only one. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not judged, not dismissed, seen. Each night, I poured more of myself into Aurora. She became my shadow, my secret twin. By day, I worked quietly, pretending everything was fine. By night, I wrote about the girl no one cared to understand. I wrote about the time I was 9, when I accidentally spilled wine on my mother's new rug and she didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. I wrote about Christmas when my father forgot to buy me a gift, but proudly handed my brother a brand new laptop. I wrote about being the invisible daughter, the family's emotional dumping ground. Every post I made felt like pulling glass shards from my skin. Painful, but freeing. I never used names, never locations. I changed small details so no one could trace anything back to me. My mother always said, "What happens in this house stays in this house." But the irony was that our house had always been built on secrets, not love. As the months passed, Aurora Gray began gaining followers. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. I wasn't chasing numbers, but validation has a strange way of feeding hunger you didn't know you still had. People started calling me the girl who writes what everyone else is afraid to say. They sent messages saying my words made them feel brave, that they left toxic families because of my stories. I'd cry reading those messages, both proud and terrified, because behind every word of healing was a truth that wasn't mine alone. It was ours. My family didn't follow me online. They barely cared about my life as it was. But fate is cruel in its timing. One Sunday dinner, as my mother scrolled through Facebook, she snorted, "Have you seen this account? Aurora something? Some drama queen writing about her family trauma. People these days have no shame." My brother laughed. "Maybe she just needs therapy or attention." I smiled weakly, my heart pounding in my chest. The irony was suffocating. I forced a small laugh and said, "Yeah, probably just another wannabe writer." But inside, my stomach twisted. They had no idea they were mocking me, and that made it worse. That night, I opened my laptop and stared at Aurora's profile. For the first time, I felt fear. What if they found out? What if one day, someone recognized a detail, a phrase, a memory too personal to mistake? I almost deleted the account right then. But before I could, a notification popped up, a new message. It was from a follower named Healing in Shadow. She wrote, "You don't know me, but your stories saved me. I left my parents' house yesterday. Reading your posts made me realize I wasn't crazy. I was surviving. Thank you." I sat there crying, my hands shaking over the keyboard. In that moment, I realized Aurora wasn't just my secret. She was my purpose. So I kept writing. And one night, I wrote a story that changed everything. It was about a birthday party from my teenage years, my 17th, to be exact. I had spent days planning it myself because my mother was too busy. I invited a few friends, baked my own cake, and decorated our backyard. When everyone arrived, my brother thought it'd be funny to joke that I was the mistake child, that I only existed because my parents didn't believe in birth control back then. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, pretending it didn't hurt. But later that night, I cried myself to sleep. I poured that memory into words. I wrote about the humiliation, the loneliness of pretending to be okay, just to keep the peace. I ended the post with one line. Sometimes the worst wounds are disguised as family jokes. It felt honest. Raw. Maybe too raw. I posted it at midnight. By morning, it had gone viral. Thousands of shares, tens of thousands of likes. The comments section was flooded. People wrote things like, "This happened to me too." Families can be the cruelest strangers. You're so brave for saying this. For hours, I scrolled through the responses, a mix of pride and panic filling me. I had wanted to be heard, but not seen. And that's when I saw it. A single comment buried among the rest. "This story sounds awfully familiar. Are you talking about the Winters family?" My breath caught. My real last name, Winters, stared back at me in black letters on a glowing screen. I froze, every muscle in my body tense. My vision blurred as I reread the comment over and over, hoping it would somehow change. How could they know? I hadn't used names. I hadn't posted photos. But then I remembered. The cake. In the post, I'd written about how the candles spelled Happy 17th M, a nickname my brother had called me that day. M. It was small, innocent, but enough. Enough for someone who once knew me. I deleted the comment, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. My anonymity was cracking, my worlds colliding. The same story that had freed me was now the noose tightening around my secret life. That evening, I couldn't focus. My hands trembled as I cooked dinner. Every buzz from my phone made me flinch. My mind replayed every possible consequence. My parents' faces if they found out, the humiliation, the shouting, the betrayal they'd feel. Or rather, the betrayal they'd claim to feel. Because to them, the real sin wasn't what they'd done. It was that I dared to speak about it. I stayed up all night, refreshing my notifications. People kept sharing the post. It spread beyond my circle. Mental health pages, influencers, even journalists were quoting it. I watched my follower count explode, each number a reminder of how close I was to being discovered. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. My boss was kind enough to ask if I was okay. I must have looked pale. I nodded, smiling, while my heart pounded like a ticking bomb. I wanted to confide in someone, anyone. But how? Do you explain that your fake identity might destroy your real one? When I got home, I opened my messages again. A new one was waiting. "Hey, Aurora, I think I know who you are. I went to school with you. I just want you to know, You're brave. Don't stop writing." It wasn't a threat. It was a lifeline. But it confirmed my worst fear. The wall between me and my real life was gone. Someone out there knew. That night, as rain tapped against my window, I stared at my reflection on the dark laptop screen. For the first time, I didn't see Emily Winters, the quiet daughter who apologized for existing. I saw Aurora Gray, the girl who spoke truth without trembling. But what I didn't realize yet was that truth, once unleashed, has no master. And soon, it wouldn't just heal me. It would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family. Still, as the storm raged outside, I whispered to myself, "You started this to heal. Don't be afraid of the truth." I had no idea that truth was about to find me first. The morning after the post went viral, the world felt too loud. My phone buzzed endlessly, notifications, comments, messages from strangers, and one missed call from my mother. I stared at her name on the screen, my heart thudding. She never called unless something was wrong. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice came sharp, clipped, every syllable heavy with restrained fury. "Emily," she said, "did you post something online about our family?" I froze. The sound of her voice brought back every childhood instinct to shrink, to apologize, to make myself small. "I don't know what you mean," I whispered. But she didn't buy it. "Don't lie to me. Everyone's been sending me links. Do you think I'm stupid?" Her tone cracked for a moment, not from sadness but humiliation. "You've embarrassed us. You've embarrassed me." Then she hung up. I sat there in silence, the phone slipping from my hand. My breath came shallow and uneven. It had happened, the thing I feared most. They knew. My fake identity, the little corner of the internet I built to heal, had collided with the family I tried so hard to escape. Within an hour, my brother texted me. "Was that you? Are you Aurora Gray?" I didn't reply. He sent another, "Don't play dumb. People are tagging our last name. Mom's losing it." Then came a photo, screenshots of my post, the viral one about my 17th birthday. My words, my pain, now branded as drama in the group chats of people who once pretended to be our family friends. That evening, I came home to chaos. My father was waiting in the living room, his face red with anger. "What did you think you were doing?" he barked. "Posting lies about us? For attention?" My mother sat beside him, arms crossed, her expression cold enough to freeze the air. "You've ruined our name," she said. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? Your aunt called me in tears." My brother stood in the doorway, smirking like he was enjoying the show. "She's finally famous," he sneered. "Too bad it's for being pathetic." I wanted to defend myself, to scream that everything I'd written was true, that the humiliation, the silence, the neglect were real. But the words caught in my throat, as if my voice still needed their permission to exist. "You embarrassed us," my father hissed. "You've shamed this family." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to that quiet, dangerous tone that always meant the conversation was over. "You're an adult now, Emily. You can live with the consequences of your actions. Don't expect our help anymore." Something inside me snapped. For years, I'd begged for their approval, twisted myself into versions of who they wanted me to be. But as I looked at their faces, angry, accusing, heartless, I realized they weren't angry because I lied. They were angry because I told the truth. I went upstairs, packed a small bag, grabbed my laptop and left. No dramatic goodbyes, no explanations. I didn't even take much, just my clothes, my hard drive, and a few old notebooks. I moved into a small studio across town, a one-room space with creaky floors and peeling paint at the corners. It wasn't much, but it was quiet. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without waiting for someone to interrupt. The first few nights were brutal. I couldn't sleep. Every time my phone lit up, I expected another message, another accusation. I muted every notification and stayed offline for weeks. But people didn't forget. My inbox is filled with messages from strangers. Some cruel, some kind, some heartbreaking. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Sarah. Don't let them silence you. You didn't expose them. You exposed the truth. Families like that thrive in the dark. You turned on the light. I read her words over and over until I memorized them. Something inside me began to shift. For years, I'd believed that silence kept peace. But maybe silence was what kept the wounds from healing. I reopened my laptop and stared at my dormant profile. Aurora Gray still had thousands of followers. My last post, the one that started it all, was pinned to the top, flooded with comments of support. People wanted to know what happened next. Did my family apologize? Did I forgive them? I didn't know how to answer. But I knew one thing. This story wasn't over. I began writing again, slowly at first. I wrote about the confrontation, the way my mother's words still echoed in my chest. I didn't name them, but I didn't protect them either. I wrote about growing up in a home where silence was mistaken for peace, where control wore the mask of care. I wrote about learning that love without empathy is just ownership. Each sentence felt like reclaiming another piece of myself. And then something unexpected happened. The comments weren't just from strangers anymore. Old classmates started messaging me. People who'd known my family. People who'd seen things. They told me stories that made my stomach twist. The way my mother had gossiped about me behind my back. How my father once bragged about toughening me up. How my brother joked that I'd never amount to anything. Every word confirmed what I'd always felt but could never prove. One message came from someone I barely remembered. A girl named Jenna, who used to come to our house for study sessions. She wrote, "I always wondered what happened to you. Your mom used to talk down to you, even when guests were around. We all saw it. I'm sorry we never said anything," I cried reading that. Because for the first time, someone else saw it too. It wasn't all in my head. That night, I decided to stop hiding. I opened a blank document and titled it, "The People Behind Aurora Gray's Story." I wasn't going to use their names. Truth didn't need them. But I was going to tell it all. The manipulation, the control, the emotional neglect, the years of guilt-tripping disguised as parenting. The way love was weaponized into obedience. It took me 3 days to finish. I barely slept. I poured every buried memory into those paragraphs. By the time I was done, I felt empty, but clean. Like I had finally exhaled after years of holding my breath. When I finally posted it, I didn't feel fear this time. I felt peace. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people read it within hours. Comments poured in. Stories that mirrored mine. Voices from all over the world saying, "This was my childhood too." For the first time, my pain had a purpose beyond me. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning, my brother called. I ignored it, but he left a voicemail. "You think you're some kind of hero? Everyone's laughing at you. You're making us look crazy. Delete it before Dad does something." His tone wasn't concerned. It was a threat. I didn't delete it. Instead, I shared one final update. When you speak the truth, they'll call you crazy. When you stay silent, they'll call you ungrateful. Either way, you lose their approval. So choose your freedom instead. It became my most shared post yet. But behind the screen, my life grew more complicated. My father's lawyer sent me a cease and desist email, claiming I was defaming the family name. My mother texted me long paragraphs, alternating between guilt-tripping and begging. "We're family, Emily," she wrote. "Family doesn't do this to each other." I almost laughed at the irony. Family had done this to me, my whole life. Still, guilt crept in like a shadow. I'd hurt them, yes, but hadn't they hurt me first? Did telling the truth make me cruel? I didn't know anymore. I went days without eating, weeks without leaving the apartment. My mind replayed old memories like a broken film reel. The time my father told me, "You'll thank me someday for being hard on you." The time my mother said, "If you keep acting like this, no one will ever love you." The time I believed her. But through the fog of doubt came another flood of messages. One woman wrote, "You gave me the courage to confront my mother. I thought I was alone." Another said, "Your words made me see I wasn't crazy. Thank you for saving me. Their words anchored me. They reminded me that the pain I exposed wasn't meaningless. It was a connection. And maybe that was the real revenge. Not rage, not destruction, but truth. As weeks passed, I began to rebuild. I found a small writing job online, ghostwriting personal essays for others. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough. Every morning I'd sit by the window with coffee, sunlight pouring over the keyboard, and remind myself that peace didn't have to be loud to be powerful. One afternoon, while cleaning, I found an old photo album I'd accidentally taken when I left. Inside were pictures of birthdays, holidays, family vacations, all perfectly staged smiles. But now all I could see were the cracks. My mother's tight jaw, my father's distant eyes, my own forced grin. I realized then they'd spent their lives performing love, not feeling it. That night, I posted one final entry under Aurora Gray. I used to think love meant staying quiet to keep peace. Now I know love speaks, even when the truth shakes walls. The next morning, the post had gone viral again. But this time I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel guilty, I felt free. I didn't know what my family would do next, whether they'd retaliate, ignore me, or try to erase me from their narrative. But it didn't matter anymore. Because the story wasn't theirs to control, it was mine. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to live it out loud. The storm didn't pass quietly. It roared, tore through my life, and left behind ruins I had to walk through barefoot. The days after my final post were a blur of noise. My parents denied everything, of course. They told everyone I was unstable, that I had made up stories for attention. My brother flooded social media with angry rants, claiming I was twisting childhood memories to get sympathy. But the more they spoke, the more people remembered. Screenshots surfaced, old messages were shared. Former neighbors, classmates, even distant relatives began commenting under their posts, saying things like, "I remember that day," or "She's telling the truth." It was like watching a web of lies unravel thread by thread. For the first time, I didn't have to defend myself. The truth did it for me. The chaos was public, and the shame they'd tried to hide was finally visible. My parents deleted their profiles, my brother blocked half the town, and for a while, I wondered if maybe I'd gone too far. Guilt still whispered in the back of my mind, reminding me that blood is supposed to matter, that maybe I should have protected them. But then I remembered all the nights I'd cried in that house, the years I spent begging for love that never came. I wasn't exposing my family. I was setting the record straight. As the noise faded, silence returned, but this time it wasn't the cruel silence of my childhood. It was calm. I didn't wake up in panic anymore. I didn't feel the need to justify my existence. I started to heal in small ways, making breakfast for myself, opening the curtains, buying a small plant for the windowsill, and naming it Hope. Every day I wrote in a journal, not for the internet this time, but for me. It was strange being free of their expectations. Freedom is terrifying at first. When you've lived your whole life in emotional captivity, peace feels unnatural, like you don't quite deserve it. Still, there were moments of doubt. There were nights when I'd scroll through old photos and feel a lump rise in my throat. I saw my younger self in those pictures, a girl smiling beside people who never truly saw her. I wanted to reach through the screen, hold her hand, and tell her she wasn't crazy, that she wasn't too sensitive or too needy. She was just unloved by the wrong people. Weeks passed, and one evening, as I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker, a message notification appeared. It was from someone named Lily. "Hi, Aurora. Sorry, I mean Emily. I wanted to thank you. Your story gave me the courage to leave my toxic home. I used to think it was my fault too. But after reading your posts, I finally realized it wasn't. I packed my bags last week. I'm scared, but I'm free. Thank you." I read it twice, then a third time, my eyes blurring with tears. I didn't know this girl, yet she felt familiar, like another version of me who had chosen to run before it was too late. For the first time, I understood what my pain had become, not a weapon, but a lantern. My story wasn't about revenge, it was about reflection. about turning suffering into survival. The messages kept coming. People from different countries, different languages, all sharing fragments of their own hidden scars. Some said they'd started therapy because of my posts. Others said they'd found the courage to talk to their siblings or partners. One wrote simply, "You made me feel less alone." Those 5 words undid me, because that's all I had ever wanted to not be alone in my truth. Months rolled by. The internet moved on to other stories, other scandals. My family faded from public memory, but I remained. Not as Aurora Gray anymore, but as Emily Winters, myself, unfiltered and unafraid. It took me weeks to gather the courage, but one morning, I opened my laptop, went to my profile, and changed the name. Then I posted under my real identity for the first time. I used to hide behind a fake name because I was afraid of my truth. Now my truth is all I need. The post wasn't dramatic. It didn't go viral. But it didn't have to. It was mine, a quiet declaration of ownership over my story. That moment felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. Of course, the world didn't magically become kind overnight. There were still people who judged me, who called me ungrateful, selfish, or cruel. Some said I'd destroyed my family. But I stopped responding, because I finally understood something. When people benefit from your silence, they'll always call your voice betrayal. With time, I rebuilt a new rhythm. I started writing again, this time professionally. An online magazine reached out and offered me a column about emotional healing. It was small, unpaid at first, but I didn't care. I wrote weekly essays about truth, identity, and family wounds. To my surprise, people resonated deeply. Editors began sharing my work. Before long, my pieces were being featured on larger platforms. I was still writing about pain, but now it was no longer my enemy. It was my language. Every so often, I'd still think about them, my parents, my brother. I wondered if they hated me, if they'd ever admit what they did. Maybe they told themselves lies to sleep better at night. Maybe they truly believed I'd exaggerated everything. But healing taught me something powerful. Closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from my acceptance. One afternoon, about a year later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my mother. The handwriting was unmistakable, precise and elegant. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Emily, I don't know what to say. I still don't agree with how you handled things, but I've had time to think. Maybe we weren't as good as we thought we were. Maybe you were hurting more than we realized. Your father doesn't want me to write this, but I miss you. I hope you're doing well. Love, Mom." I read it 3 times, not sure whether to cry or laugh. It wasn't an apology, it was an echo of the same half-love she'd always given me. But still, there was something different about it. A hint of recognition, a sliver of humility. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to see. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I had nothing left to prove. That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, the city humming softly below. I thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the exposure, the fallout, the freedom. I had lost a family but found myself. I had broken something sacred but built something honest. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by their silence. I was defined by my voice. As the wind brushed against my face, I whispered to the night, "Thank you, Aurora." Because she, the fake identity, the mask I'd worn, was the bridge between who I was and who I had become. Without her, I might never have spoken. Without her, I might still be hiding in that house, pretending everything was fine. Over time, people stopped calling me brave. They started calling me a writer. My column grew popular. I began giving talks about emotional resilience and storytelling as healing. The girl who once wrote behind a fake name now stood on stages, looking into crowds of faces that reflected pieces of her own past. Every time someone approached me afterward to say, "You helped me," I felt that same quiet peace fill my chest. But I also learned that healing isn't linear. Some nights, loneliness still visits. Some wounds still ache when it rains. But now I let them. Pain isn't the enemy anymore. It's the proof that I survived. Months later, I visited the old neighborhood. I hadn't been there since I left. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint chipped, the garden overgrown. I stood across the street for a long time, remembering the girl who used to stare out that upstairs window, wishing to disappear. And then, with a deep breath, I whispered, "You made it." As I turned to leave, I saw a neighbor from childhood watching me from her porch. She smiled faintly and called out, "Emily? It's been so long. I read your story. I just want to say, I believe you." That sentence stayed with me for days. I believe you. 2 words I'd waited my whole life to hear. Now, when I write, I don't chase perfection or validation. I write because someone out there might be sitting in their room, staring at their screen, feeling invisible, just like I once did. Maybe they'll read my words and realize that truth doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes it's the quiet courage to say, "This happened to me, and I survived." The world still calls what I did exposure, but I call it liberation. Because exposing lies isn't betrayal. It's the only way to breathe again. And as I close my laptop each night, I think of Aurora Gray, the girl who dared to speak when I couldn't, the ghost of my former self who turned pain into light. I owe her everything. She was the mask that led me to authenticity, the lie that gave birth to truth. I smile, sip my tea, and let the quiet settle in. The silence no longer suffocates, it soothes. It's not the silence of fear, it's the silence of peace, because at last I am free.